Hello, and thanks for your time today. Welcome to this presentation about construction ready in the construction sector. Let's jump into it. So I'm Jordan, and I'm project manager with the Construction Foundation of BC, and I work on the Construction Ready project. And I'm here to talk about the sector, about jobs and other opportunities therein. So one of the things that I like to talk about when I do my introduction is to tell the story. So here is me, and that's my back in Jordan, in a place called Wadi Rum. And it's kind of funny because how I got there. So a while back, after I graduated, I decided I wanted to travel. And the only opportunity that I had for work was either to work in a fast food restaurant or to go on site and work on a school. So what I ended up doing was going at 7 o'clock in the morning, walking on site and asking if I could have a job. The guy who was hiring said, come back tomorrow. So the next day, I showed up a little bit earlier, 6:45, and I said, hey, can I have a job? And he put me to work. Now, I did that for about a year, and that enabled me to do the things that I really wanted to do. In this case, go to this amazing place in the middle of the desert. And it's pretty incredible because it's carved out of the rock itself. So there I am in Jordan, yeah. Now to get there, I had to do this. Up there you can see the first thing I ever built. So this is something I'm ridiculously proud of, and it looks pretty good, but the part that I actually made was the part that you can't see. So my first job, I had the opportunity to build this school, and part of it was to actually do the insulation in that little dormer at the top there. And the first day that I ever got to do that was about 4 months after I started working. And what's cool about this for me is even though all I did was work on the insulation, I'm still incredibly proud of that dormer. So I actually, every time I drive by, I still point it out, much to the chagrin and annoyance of all of my family. But what's kind of neat about that is that this is something that I did that enabled me to do the other things that I wanted to do in life. And it was also something that I started doing that enabled me to always work no matter wherever I was. So I learned the skills on that job that enabled me to work in every country I've lived in, as well as every time that I needed a job. And it's also enabled me to do things that I wanted to do, like travel. So what I'd like to talk to you today about is what it is that the sector looks like, the career opportunities there, and to give you a little bit of an intro into our sector. So what is Construction Ready, and what is it for? So a while back, we started out with this idea of going around the province and asking industry what it is that they look for when hiring a young person. And what was interesting about it is that through that conversation, we started to look at what's the information out there that talks to young people about the trades, that talks about the sector. And so what I heard over and over again was that there isn't enough awareness of the opportunities that are there. So the construction industry is kind of something that's ubiquitous. We almost take it for granted. So wherever you are right now, if you look up at the roof and you see up there, you can see some lights, probably a few pipes, maybe some vents and other sprinklers hanging down. Those are all built by different tradespeople, and they're all designed by designers and architects. They're all configured by engineers and lots of other occupations that go into that. You look out the window, you can see right through. That's a glazier that made that. You can see the road builders made that. All around us, the construction industry impacts everything that we do. What's also amazing about that is it's not just trades. When you look around, you can see there's a lot of other occupations that are related to that. So you've got all of the things that you do hands-on, but also the things that are related to the development, the design, and ultimately also the running and maintenance of those structures. And it's everywhere we have everywhere around us. So it's in the houses that we live in the residential sector, it's in the buildings that we shop in, it's in the places that we go to work, and it's also in the places that we study. So one of the things that I heard over and over again was we needed to get past this idea that it's just the trades, that you're just looking at the trades when you're talking about the construction sector. The reality is that it's so much more, but trades can often be a starting point for a lot of people. Now, in BC, there's about 120 certified trades, and we can consider about 50 of those to be construction industry specific or related. And this is everything from the people who install the piping up ahead, like the sprinkler fitters, to the people who build the floors, like the carpenters. It's the refrigeration technicians, it's the HVAC operators, it's the people who install the roofs, it's the people who install everything. It's a different trade for almost every single thing that you see. What's cool about this is that almost all of them require the same training process. So when we look at trades, it's a starting point. They all end up into using the same process, which is the apprenticeship system. Apprenticeship system is pretty cool because it's actually an opportunity to go to school at the same time as getting paid. So you have an opportunity to earn while you learn. The way that the apprenticeship system in BC works is that it's about 20% in class and 80% on the job. And that means about 20% of your time you're studying, learning from books, taking on the theoretical and practical aspects, and then the 80% of it is out there on the job, getting paid while you learn the rest, and it's about gaining experience. Now the really tricky thing about apprenticeship that's often overlooked is that it's one critical thing to get into it. An apprenticeship can't happen without a job. So to get into your start in the trades, you often have to find your first job. The tricky thing is, where do you do that? In my case, it was easy because I could walk down the street. There was a guy who was hiring right away, and I started as a laborer, which is where most people start. They start cleaning site, carrying wire, schlepping materials. It's an entry point for a lot of us. Some people get a chance by starting out with a family or a friend and getting into it that way. But the really critical thing is that there are some things you need to know when you're looking for work in the sector. So what happened for us is we went around the province and we asked about 250 employers what they would look for in a young person. And we came up with a few things. Now this is what we call the industry ask. The idea with this was that we got all of the feedback from all of these different employers and talked to them about their training processes, who they hire, how they hire, where they look for young workers, and what their needs are. And we have something that we're faced with right now in industry that has never really happened before. We have about 1/3 of the people who are working in our industry retiring in the next 10 years. Now if you think about that, that's about 220,000 people in BC working in the construction sector. It's about 70,000 of them are retiring. It's a pretty big issue, and it's also a pretty big opportunity. So if you're wondering about how you get your start, that's what I'm here to talk about next. So the industry ask. The idea was that we went out and we talked to employers, and they gave us the same thing every time. They wanted to hire on one thing, and that was attitude. But they also thought they would look for specific things like skills and knowledge. Now, these are really, really big concepts and often really vague, but they're also excellent starting points. So when we talk about attitude, and this is the thing that every single employer will ask for, it's often the same. They're looking for somebody who's willing to work hard, who's committed, and shows initiative. Now, what's interesting about this is that any sector that you look in, almost from the construction sector to the technologies to even education, it's often all hiring off the same thing. So when they said attitude, I didn't think that was good enough. We asked them to define it a little bit better. So we got them to define it into these 5 categories of things. So hardworking, responsible, showing initiative, being a team player, and being ready to learn. What was interesting about this is that those are still pretty vague, so we got them to break it down even further. So on something like hardworking, we got them to break it down into the most commonly sought for or looked for things. This is being punctual and dependable, showing a strong work ethic, and having an optimistic mindset. Now, optimistic mindset is something that's often overlooked. It's just that positive attitude, sometimes referred to as the can-do attitude, if you're from the 40s. But in general, it's those sorts of things that employers are looking for above all else. That ability to be on time, not just showing up at 7 o'clock if the day starts at 7, but actually getting your boots on and ready to go at 7. Having a strong work ethic, which means asking questions. It means looking for things to do when you've finished your last thing. It also is, it's also something that you show in other aspects of your life. So one of the things that was really interesting about all of this stuff is that we went to employers and we said, well, okay, so if somebody's starting out and they've never worked in the industry before, what would you look for when hiring? And so we started to map out the different things that you could do. And this includes everything from playing on a team sport to starting your own World of Warcraft guild to being somebody who volunteers or babysits or all these different things that you're probably already doing in life that show these things. It's just about being able to tell somebody all about it. So I have this example that I often talk about when I talk about my attitude. Now that's me jumping over somebody who, yes, is significantly shorter than me, but also is representative of something that I do, which is play Ultimate Frisbee. Now Ultimate is a sport that doesn't have referees. So a key part of it is that you have to have the right attitude. You have to have a bit of integrity in yourself, own your mistakes, be accountable, and also do all of the different things that are required being a good teammate. So I played at a competitive level, I also played at a fun level, and all throughout that it was the same sorts of things. I had to show up and be supportive of my teammates. I had to show up on time, I had to take care of myself, and on the field I had to play with integrity. Now this translates to my life. Whenever I have to deal with people at work, or if I'm dealing with a problem or trying to figure out something different, it's the same sort of attitude that I showed in Ultimate that I have to show at work. Chances are you've probably done this too. So I'm thinking maybe you play on a sport, or maybe you have joined a club at school, or played an instrument, or all these other sorts of things that show that you have commitment and dependability and all those other sorts of attitudes that employers are looking for. The other thing that they were looking for was skills. Now skills are interesting because when we typically think about skills, we think about the hands-on stuff. That, I know how to use a hammer, or I know how to use a screwdriver, or I know how to identify all these different types of materials. But the reality is there's so much more than just that. So it's everything that also comes with the interpersonal skills, your ability to communicate, your ability to work out solutions together, to understand instructions, to read forms and to fill out forms. It's also one of the things that people are looking for right now is the ability to read and interpret blueprints. And while it seems to be a super easy thing, it's actually a very difficult or very important skill, and very difficult to find. So when we talk about skills, one of the things that often comes up is the things that you don't necessarily think about when you think about the trades. So how many of you have heard of this idea of the dumb tradesperson, the person who couldn't do anything else? This is where I pause to see if you actually put up your hand. Although I can't see you, I don't actually know if you are. But the reality is, in our industry, there's no such thing as a dumb tradesperson. Everything that you see around you is built on really precise calculations and requires a certain amount of understanding of both geometry, but also the ability to measure, the ability to be accurate, and ability to be consistent in terms of your interpretation of what you see on paper and how you turn it into reality. Now what's really important about this is when you talk to an employer, you talk to any employer in any industry or in any trade, you'll see the same sort of thing. They're looking for somebody who is able to interpret things for themselves. Whether it's doing it in your head, so looking at a run of bricks and calculating how many bricks you need just based on knowing the size of the brick and the width of the wall. Or it might be something more technical, like the ability to calculate out how many rises you will need on a stair between the first floor and the second. So a lot of the times, the most important skills that you have are probably things that you're already doing in school. And it's also important to know that if you're heading towards a trade, maybe you want to be a refrigeration technician. There's certain requirements that they'll look for when you do your first level of training, if you do a foundation program, that you'll need to have. So if you're in grade 10 or 11 now, it might be worth looking into that. Because chances are, if you don't do that, you're not going to be able to access that trade. So in my life, my skills are something that has followed me wherever I've gone. And I had the great opportunity a while ago to buy a place that needed a lot of work. So these are the pictures to the left of me. That's my living room, and that's the floor before and then after. This is something that I learned when working on that school originally, but then in subsequent jobs, I always found that I was able to take the skills that I'd learned on those sites and carry them with me into life. So not only the ability to find work, but also in the ability to do things for myself. So in my own home, in my friends' homes, or wherever, it's an ability that I have no matter what. It's also something that enables me to do things that I always wanted to do. So I've had a dream since I was a kid of owning my own forest cabin. Now I don't yet own a piece of land in a forest, and I don't yet own a cabin. I don't yet know exactly when that will happen, but it's something that I have always dreamed of, and it's something that I feel like I'm growing the skills over time the more that I work in the trades that will enable me to do that for myself. What's also really important about this is it's something that I'm incredibly proud of. No matter no matter who comes over, I'm always quick to point out the things that I really like. Of course, hide the mistakes that almost only I can see. But the thing about it is it's something that, and whenever I look at it, I go, yeah, I did that. And that's something that will never be taken away. So when you think about a trades career, you think about the construction sector, it's not just work, although work's also an important part of it. It's all those things that you can take into your life. Now you've probably already started down this road and learned some skills either at home, doing projects with your family, or maybe at school in a shop class. And if not, there's chances it's not too late. There's chances to do this both at school and on your own. Sometimes it's as simple as looking up some plans, watching a video on YouTube, buying some materials and getting started. The reality is when you're looking for an employment, the ability to point to a project that you've done and the ability to talk about the things that you can do is a really, really good starting point. It also enables you to do things that will transfer into a lot of other avenues in life, not only in your own home, but in the sector and then other jobs as you go on. So one of the things the last thing that really came up in that industry ask was knowledge. Now, knowledge is a tricky one because sometimes it's difficult to discern the difference between skills and knowledge. But we always like to talk about it. Skills are the things that you can do with your hands and do in the world, and knowledge is what you know and what enables you to do those things. When we were making these, it was really difficult to actually describe what you needed to know. Over and over again, we heard the same thing, and it was actually something we heard when we were talking about attitudes and skills as well. It was this idea of being able to work safely. So under knowledge, we have two. We have know the industry and know how to work safely. And above all, if there's anything that you do that shows you're ready to work in the construction sector, it's the ability to demonstrate safety. So maybe you've done that in your life. Maybe you've gone out and you've done a WHMIS course or a first aid course. Or maybe you've done that in part of your job that you've had at the grocery store or anywhere else. It's the ability to look at a situation, know the risks, interpret them, and then be able to perform your job safely. It's a really, really important thing, not only for industry, but for yourself. At the end of the day, we all want to go home. And it's not a matter of how much risk you're going to take and how much chance you're going to take. It's about doing your job and being able to do those things at home at the end of the day. So the one other thing that we talked about, and it came up over and over again, was this idea of when a young person applies to work for me, if I was an employer, I want to know that they know what they're getting into. So how much do they know about my company? Do they know what kind of things we do? Do they know what kind of things we build? Do we know what kind of skills that we need? There's a huge difference between the people who are building houses and the people who are building skyscrapers. While the skills might not be that different, your ability to understand the building process varies quite drastically. So if you look around next time you're driving through downtown, you'll see that there's these skyrises going up that are made almost entirely out of concrete. And then you go out into maybe a subdivision up north, and you'll see that a lot of that is made out of wood. And that different design process is built on the materials that are available, but also the style that it'll end up looking like in the end. So part of it is knowing not only that you want to work in the sector, but it's also being able to say, these are the kind of terminology that I'm going to see, is the type of things I need to know. Now, what a really good example of this is earlier, my colleague Dave and I were sitting around having breakfast. And remember that dormer picture from earlier on that I insisted was a dormer? Well, Dave corrected me. Technically, it's a Dutch hip. Now, I have no idea what a Dutch hip is, but apparently it's a dormer without a window. So, even after all of this time, I still don't know the proper terminology. Part of that is that there's a vast amount of terminology to know. So where do you start? Well, oftentimes it's just looking at the books that are available to you in the library. It's going out and learning it as you build it. But it's also getting that experience that'll give you some exposure to see what's out there and what kind of things are there. So it's knowing what the difference between a form is and what the difference between a framed wall is. It's the ability to identify certain processes, certain safety things, and as well is that ability to take your experience and turn it into an identification of tools or materials that you're going to need on site. So an example I often think of is an ability to anticipate something. So if I'm able to work with somebody on site and I've started out and I've gained some experience and I know the tools that are typically used, I'm able to ask questions more accurately. And I can anticipate the needs of the person that I'm working with. So when I started out on that school job, one of the first times I ever got to put on my pouch and use my tools, I was installing siding. And I didn't know what I was doing. And I was in the way. I was a real pain to work with, actually. And part of the problem was I didn't actually know what I was doing. And over time, I learned what I needed to know. I learned what a speed square was. I learned what a level was. I learned how to read measurements and communicate them and to interpret measurements as they were yelled across the parking lot at me. I was standing on the saw cutting things and somebody would yell 18 and 5/8 and I'd be able to look at a tape measure and tell the difference between a 5/8 and a 1/2 inch. And what was really cool about that was over time I gained these things and this understanding. I became better at what I was doing, but it also enabled me to have a better appreciation for the things that were built around me. So the other stuff around explaining or knowing the industry is also knowing what you want to do in it. And I don't know how many things that you do in life that you know you like because of watching it on YouTube or seeing it in a photo or seeing somebody else do it. But most of the things that I like in life, I know that I like them because I've tried. So the Ultimate example is a great one. I know I like Ultimate because I played at a tournament. That was the first time that I ever went, yeah, this is really for me. I know that I like building things because I built things. And I know that I like traveling because I'd actually have gone to Jordan and all of these other countries that really show me what else is out there in the world. And I knew I wanted to do that, but I never really appreciated it until I tried it. So this is what I'm here to encourage you to do, is to know the industry by getting out and gaining some experience. It helps you make an informed decision, but it also helps you know exactly what it is that you want to do. Because there's lots of variation within industry, there's lots of variation between trades, and there's lots of variation between the work available locally and other parts of the province. So take the chance and go out and try it. There's lots of programs in your school that enable you to do that, and the best person to talk to about that is probably sitting in the room with you. It's your teachers, it's your career counselors, and it's your shop teachers as well. So when we talk about knowing the industry, one of the things that always comes up to me is that there's this line that was told me early on in this process that we started doing this. And an employer told me, I'm going to invest in you as much as you invest in yourself. And the idea with this was that she would rather hire somebody who knows exactly what they want out of it than somebody who's just there because they're not really sure. Now, it's okay not to know exactly what you want to do, but part of it is knowing what the opportunity is. So when she talked about knowing industry, she talked about knowing what the career opportunities were. And part of that is the apprenticeship system. So this is a map that we took, and we tried to make everything we could as simple as possible. Now, nobody's pathway actually looks like this. The reality is that this is an oversimplification of the different things that are out there. But what you have here is 3 different starting points. You've got this idea of going straight from here with this little phone screen, which says Future Builder on it. So this is where you are in high school. This is the accumulation of everything that you've done at home, at school, on sports teams, at work, and volunteer, and all of these different activities, all the things that have shown that you have the right attitude, skills, and knowledge. It's about capturing that and then getting a start. So there's 3 ways that you can get into this, and that's often the pathway that most people go through is straight to the middle one, and that's what I did. I started as a laborer. So the idea with this is if you've got 3 options, straight into an apprenticeship, into being a laborer, trades helper, or going into post-secondary, do you know what's available to you, and do you know what you can do now? So chances are in your school you have access to this bottom one, the post-secondary, through what they call a foundation program. Now the foundation program is something that's usually offered by the college, but it's an introduction to trades. It's a pre-apprenticeship program, and one of the things that you'll find with that is it gives you all of the knowledge and some of the skill that you need to get your start in a specific trade. Now that doesn't mean that you can't go out and gain experience. In fact, I encourage you to. Go out and try it out. Maybe it's over spring break or in the summer or through a school program. Go out and see if the trade's for you. So maybe you've always wanted to be a sheet metal worker, and who hasn't? I know that one of the funnest jobs I ever had in construction was a sheet metal worker, because you take these sheets of metal and you bend them into everything that you could possibly want. So I got to bend it into, very boring, into HVAC, into ventilation system, but I also got to build my own things. So I built tabletops and all sorts of stuff like that. So I know that I enjoyed it because I went through this and tried it out. I didn't end up pursuing it, but that's another story. So in your school, you probably have the opportunity to get started through a post-secondary route. Now this is a map that's supposed to show the entire sector. Now what's interesting about it is if you look at this, the trades, which are often associated with the construction sector, are those 5 bubbles at the top. Your apprenticeship bubbles and your certified tradesperson bubbles. The rest are all of these other occupations that you're going to find. Now they're everything that goes into building, from the design conception to the development of the land, to the permitting, to the estimating, to the engineering, to the procurement of it. It's all of the different things that you'll find along the process. And a lot of the people who work in those positions are people who got their start building things. So an example of this would be an estimator. Now you probably heard estimating from math class or grade 2 when you were told to estimate the number of apples that Susie would have if she ate all of the ones in her basket. I can't remember the exact example, it was a long time ago. But an estimator's job is to make professional guesses. So they're looking at something and saying, this building has 6 floors, it has all of these different materials in it, it's going to take 8 months to build, and I think this building's going to cost us $7.2 million, and this is why. Now they put that in as part of the bid process and hope to be right. Reality is that it's a very, very complicated job, but it's something that you can do better by having the experience of building things yourself. You know how long things take, you know how much things usually cost, you know where the risks are in terms of running over or running under costs, and it's something that can come from experience. So the reality is you can get your start through this route up here, going the trades route, and then at some point make that choice to transition into some of those more office occupations. So with this, what we really wanted to show you was that there's an infinite number of opportunities. My pathway isn't linear. I went out into the laboring and trades route, and I was sponsored as an apprentice, And then I got distracted and wanted to go traveling, and I traveled around, and then I came back and started out again as a laborer and all over the place. And eventually I ended up going the post-secondary route, into a degree program, into entry-level work, and then up into project management where I am now. That wasn't the straight route, but it's more or less. What I wanted to share with you was actually my brother's route, because I think my brother is a very, very good example of what you have available to you in your school. So as I understand it, most of you are in grade 11. Which is great, because you're at the point where you can still take advantages of the programs right there in your own school. So maybe that's a shop class that you're starting now to gain some skills. Maybe it's a math class you're taking to make sure that you understand what you're getting into. Or maybe it's one of the apprenticeship programs or trades training programs that's available through a relationship with the college. So my brother started out in high school. He started by building things for himself. He was an avid mountain biker, and he lived in a really rural part of BC, where he could go out after school with his chainsaw and just build bike parks. So he built all sorts of boardwalk systems throughout the forest all around, and that's where he learned most of his base skills. He still shop class in school, but the things that he really learned to do were based on the things that he liked doing. Then in high school, he had the opportunity to take a foundation program as a carpenter. Now, typically, carpentry is a 4-year process with 4 different levels of training. And remember that 20-80 split, 20% of the time in school and 80% on the job. So he started out with a foundation program that enabled him to get his first level of training. It took him about 8 months, and in the process he had some work experience. So from that, he went out and tried to find a job. Now he was in his grade 12 year, so he just gotten his driver's license, he was ready to go, he thought he had everything he needed. But the really important thing was that he couldn't find someone who would sponsor him because he didn't have the experience. So he started out like many, many people do in the trades, getting his first experience as a laborer. So he started out for about 3 months laboring with a home building company, and eventually got sponsored as an apprentice. Now that relationship is really important, because in some cases you're going to have one apprenticeship sponsor your entire career, and in other cases you'll have multiple. Depending on the trade, it's going to be different. So make sure that you do your research when you get into it, and have that conversation with an employer. When you're ready to move into an apprenticeship, you'll know and the employer will know, and oftentimes it comes from a place of experience. So he was offered, eventually, an apprenticeship sponsorship. And what that enabled him to do was start to log hours with the Industry Training Authority, which actually put him on his pathway to be an apprentice. So he gained all of these skills on site, getting paid while he learned, and as he gained more skill, he got wage increases, and he also enabled him to do lots of other things. So he started out in residential, and that enabled him to take his experience to another part of the province. So he moved from his hometown to his second job, which enabled him to learn some more things that he otherwise wouldn't have been able to do in the hometown that he came from. Now at a certain point, there's a bicycle here because he made a decision that all he really wanted to do was mountain bike. Problem was, mountain biking is a really, really expensive hobby. For those of you who are in it now, you'll know how important it is to have some skill to be able to fix things yourself and not constantly take it in to get it fixed. But the thing that enabled him to do, the thing that working as a carpenter enabled him to do, was to move to Whistler and to frame houses in the morning and then ride his bike until he ran out of sunlight, or they kicked him off the hill, usually the first, or usually the second. So he moved to Whistler and found himself another sponsor because he had about 1.5 years worth of experience, enough that he could rationalize moving and taking his skills somewhere else. So he did that for a really long time until he fell and broke his wrist right at the end of the season, which put him back a little bit, and he had to move back to a different place. But at this point, he was done with the season, he wanted to move somewhere else, and he took the chance to go to school. So he went back and he did his level 1 training. Now, after his level 1 training, it enabled him to go back and find another job locally, and that was back in Victoria, where he was able to gain some more experience. And as he went, he gained more responsibility and more experience, which enabled him to do more and more things. So eventually he was actually running a small crew of people in his 3rd year, including myself. I actually got hired by my younger brother, which is always embarrassing, but I guess now it's been a permanent record. So he gained some experience and then went back and did his level 3 training. He went back and gained some experience. He actually got offered another job with a different company, making more money. And that enabled him to save up for what eventually would be a big trip overseas. So he actually went and traveled around Thailand and a couple other countries for a while. And then he came back and he worked as an apprentice for a bit longer, and then went and did his level 4. So eventually he had all 4 years of his training, but he didn't have enough work experience. So he went and he did that for a while until he had enough hours, submitted his application, for his, and wrote his final journeyman ticket. So after what was supposed to be a 4-year process, but was actually 6 years, he completed his certified trades certification, his certificate of qualification, and was officially a journeyman carpenter. Now, he had the opportunity to work pretty much anywhere in the province at the time, but he chose to do something that he always wanted to do, which was start his own business. So at 24, he actually bought himself an 18-foot trailer, built a small kitchen inside of it, and started his own deck building company. So now he owns his own company and is building things that he wants to build for the most part, and in his spare time he builds these other things. So this is something he just sent me last week. It's a project that he was working on. He had this idea of taking a slab and integrating it into concrete, and with the skills that he's learned, he was able to pull it off, which I was quite surprised by. So my brother's example is a pretty good one, which is that depending on where you're at in life and what you want to do, if you know that you like something or you just want to try it out, do. And then take advantage of the opportunities that are there now. And maybe through your school, it may be through your community, it may be through family or friends. But try stuff out, get a start, and then you never know where it'll take you. The question really becomes about what's next. Now, this is the part where I could easily start lecturing you about, are you ready? Do you have what it takes? All that stuff. But I don't know. It's up to you. A lot of the stuff that I found in my own career journey has been that it's something that I've wanted to do or out of pure necessity had to take a job. The reality is those jobs that I've had to take have been giving me the skills that followed me no matter what, and have been incredibly valuable. In fact, most of the time, the things that I do are based on experiences that I had building things. So in my current job, I don't have a lot of time on the tools. I have a lot of time talking to people. But the things that I learned in terms of problem solving, things that I learned in terms of communication, they've always followed me. So the question really is, for me, to you, is where are you now? What kind of attitude do you have? What kind of skills do you have? And what do you know? And is it enough to get your start? Chances are, if you're playing sports and applying yourself and showing initiative, you have enough attitude. It's the other pieces that you'll need to figure out what you're going to have to do to enable you to do the things that you want. So is there a class that you can take? Is there training that you can take? Is there some experience that you can get to help you make that decision? Now, we have a tool online on our website called constructionreadybc.ca, which is, we call it the rubric. And this is something where we took all of those different definitions of attitude, skills, and knowledge, and we broke it into something where we can actually say, are you a 1, which is not yet meeting expectation, or a 4, which is exceeding expectation? And it's a tool for you to look at the attitude that you currently have and say, where am I? So looking around in the room, I'm pretty sure you know exactly who is always on time and who's always late. The chances are the person who's always on time is going to be the one who's going to have the easiest time finding and keeping a job. It's just the reality of the world of work. If you're not there, it's hard to stay in your job. So the other aspect of this too is that we created a tool for you to use when communicating to employers that we call Future Builder. And the idea with Future Builder, and I'll explain a little bit more in a second, is that it's a portfolio of everything that you do. So it's the things that you do in life, it's the things that you do at school, it's the things that you do at work that show that you have the right attitude, skills, and knowledge. It's a chance for you to document all of the things that you do and to share it out with employers. And the goal that we have with Construction Ready is to work with employers in the community to say, how do we give young people a chance to get their start, to go out there and to figure out what's possible, and then to make that transition from school into full-time employment and apprenticeship. So the things that we like to do is work with you, your teachers, and employers to make sure that there's an opportunity for you to make a choice based on something that you've tried. The only way for you to really figure out what you want to do is to try it, to see for yourself. I don't know how many things that you do in life now that you really like to do because you've tried them for yourself, but the reality is most of the things that I've done are things that I'm passionate about because I've been doing them for a long time. They're things that I started in elementary school or middle school or high school. They're things that I do because I have friends who enjoy them. They're things that I do because I get a lot of meaning out of them. And the only way that I know that is because I went out and tried. And in fact, a lot of those things I discovered that I liked, I didn't know anything about. So sheet metal is a great example. I had no idea how to work with metal because no one in my family knew how to do that. So I went out and tried it purely because I needed a job, and it turned out that I really love it. And I still like now to tinker around with sheet metal. So to get your start and figure these things out, the best thing to do is ask. So you're going to be able to find resources in right around you. So your family, you might have people who work in the trades, you might have friends that you know who can help you get your start. You might have, your teachers will have programs at your school that allow you to get things like work experience or even some technical training. You can do these things now, or you can do them in your grade 12 year. And you'll also find that there's somebody in your community called a catalyst. And a catalyst's entire meaning for existence is to help you connect with employers who want to give you a chance to try this out. Now, it's up to you once you get there to see what you're going to do with that opportunity, but it's really about seeing for yourself and connecting to employment through hands-on experience. So as I mentioned earlier, we have this tool called Future Builder. And the idea with this was that when you make your resume now, it might seem incredibly empty. But the reality is that you have a lot of experiences and a lot of things that you've done that show that you're ready for work. So we put those all in an online tool, which you can get access through constructionreadybc.ca, and you can create your own profile and start to log the things that you do. So these are divided into 6 different types of categories, and I'm going to give you a brief overview of them now. And I really encourage you to check out our YouTube channel, which has tutorials on it, or check out the website, which will explain a bit more, or connect with the Catalyst. His name's Dave, and he's in your community, and he can help you understand the whole thing. So the first thing that we have in there is these awareness activities. The idea is these are all the things that you've done maybe in your school already, maybe through a community event, or maybe through a conversation with an employer. And if you haven't done them, it's a list of things that you can do. So there's everything from calling up an employer and asking them what they look for when they're hiring a young person, to talking to a tradesperson and seeing what kind of tools that they need. It's things like DigSafe, which is looking at what you need to do, like call before you dig, to stay safe on site. Awareness is a really critical starting point. The other thing that it allows you to do is track your skills. So these are all the things that you do in shop class. It might be a 1-week trades camp that you do. It might even be a skills competition. The other thing that employers always ask for is certifications. Now, most employers are looking for one thing above all, and that's a driver's license. And chances are, if you're applying for work without a driver's license, it's going to be an issue. Not because you're not ready, but because a driver's license enables you to do lots of different things, like access a site, run for materials. Lots of different roles in the construction sector require that you have a driver's license. Now, it doesn't mean you're not going to get a job if you don't have one, but if you have the opportunity to go and get one, I highly suggest it. I didn't get my driver's license until I was 20, and in fact, one of the issues was my first job I started at, I couldn't do a lot of the things on site that I was expected to do because I couldn't drive. Now, that was included running the forklift. It also included going to get materials and even taking materials from one side of site to the other. So that was a huge barrier for me. Eventually, when I did get my license, I actually got a $1 raise. Woo! That was $1 per hour. So that added up over, a year. The other thing that you can do is projects. So what are the things that you do at home? Maybe you tinker on a car, maybe you built something with your family, or maybe you're doing these things at school, like building a coat rack, or perhaps you've got another project that you've done. So these are things that show that you have some of the skills that are expected, but also an interest and an aptitude. One of the other things that employers always look for is job experience. Now, there's that joke that you need 5 years of job experience, even though you've only been alive for 3. Or working for 3, but the chances are that the things that you've done either voluntarily or through self-employment, like mowing lawns or babysitting, or through work at a fast food restaurant or even in another retail position, have a transferable experience for you. So the chances that if you have the ability to show that you're dedicated and motivated and able to keep a job, chances are that most construction employers will take that experience seriously. The last thing that came out of the conversation with employers was fitness activities. Now, a lot of jobs are very physically demanding. Not all of them, but a lot of jobs are very physically demanding. And it's really important that you have a base level of fitness, because this is how you stay safe. So it's not just about the ability to see hazards, but it's also the ability to perform your job safely. So lifting things properly, ability to anticipate issues, and ability to take care of yourself. This is also something that you'll show if you played on a sports team. How many times have you played a game and halfway through you've crashed because you didn't eat enough? Part of fitness is making sure that you have the ability to take care of yourself, and you can demonstrate that. It's a really important thing. So my last question to you is, are you ready? Now, I hope that what I've shared with you has been relevant and informative and given you pause to think. But ultimately, I'm a talking head on a screen. What's really important is that you go out and try. Just go and gain some experience. Walk down to a site that's near your house, see if there's a program in your school that you can take advantage of, or do a project at home with a family member or on your own. Gain that experience, make sure you do it safely. That'll enable you to make that decision of what you want to do next. So I'm going to say thank you for your time, and thank you for listening to me. And if you have any questions, please reach out to us. We're happy to talk about stuff, whether it be what kind of career options are available, the trades options, how you get involved with a program locally, or how to connect with an employer. We're happy to share our experience and our knowledge with you. So that's it for me. Yeah, have a good day.